Cold doesn't wait for the battlefield to go silent. It ambushes in the darkness, creeping into boots, stiffening fingers around frozen rifles, draining strength from the core outward. In Shuwu, soldiers quickly learned that winter was not a season, it was an enemy. Frostbite claimed more men than machine guns. Hypothermia struck faster than a sniper's bullet. A trench that felt safe from artillery could become a tomb of ice overnight. And unlike an enemy soldier, the cold never retreated, never surrendered, never slept. A human body burns calories like fuel, but when temperatures plunge below freezing, warmth leaks away faster than it can be produced. Muscles seize. Thinking slows. Slowly, invisibly, the cold turns a soldier into a statue that can no longer fight back. Fire was the obvious answer, but fire brought light, smoke, and death. So every shiver became a warning, every breath of mist a liability. Soldiers began treating heat like contraband, something you must hide, ration, and protect. Out there, warmth wasn't comfort, it was survival. Heat became a weapon that had to be controlled with the same precision as a rifle, because if the cold didn't kill you, revealing your position would. Soldiers discovered that survival often began with the body itself. Before flames, before tools. There were small tricks that stole precious heat back from the cold. Newspapers, scavenged from ruined towns or dropped supply bundles, became hidden armor. Stuffed inside jackets or wrapped around the torso, the crinkled layers trapped a bubble of warmth against the skin. Socks were doubled or tripled when possible, but when fabric ran short, strips of cloth from torn uniforms were wound around ankles and calves like makeshift insulation, even grease, wiped from machinery or scraped from empty ration, tins, could be rubbed onto leather boots to repel water and lock in heat. But the most powerful heater a soldier had was another soldier. In foxholes and dugouts, men pressed shoulders together, sharing body heat without a word. Pride didn't matter when winter was trying to kill you. Breathing even became a strategic act. A puff of warm air rising into the night could reveal a position, so soldiers learned to exhale downward, into scarves or jacket collars, keeping their location secret. At rest, they tucked hands into armpits, pulled helmets low, compressed themselves into the smallest shape possible, conserving warmth the way others might ration ammunition. These weren't comforts. They were defenses. Quiet, invisible battles fought against a relentless, freezing opponent determined to claim its victims without ever firing a shot. The ground, though frozen and unforgiving, held one secret advantage. Beneath the surface, temperatures changed slowly. Soldiers learned to work with earth, not against it. When a unit settled in for the night, they scraped away snow, laid down pine boughs, and carved shallow pits that lifted their bodies off the icy soil. The difference might only be a few degrees, but a few degrees could mean life instead of frostbite. They heated rocks in a controlled ember bed and buried them beneath sleeping areas, turning the ground itself into a silent radiator. No flame, no smoke, just warmth rising quietly through the night. Some dug narrow trenches barely wider than a shovel head, lined them with dry wood, and lit tiny fires that hugged the earth. Soil and snow piled high over the top acted like insulation, trapping heat while hiding every trace of light. The soldiers would lie close, letting that low, soft warmth seep into their bones. Others crafted crude earth ovens, using air channels to push oxygen underground, so the fire stayed alive but unseen. Warmth didn't have to roar to work. It could whisper from below, invisible to scouts scanning the horizon. These buried tricks turned cold, ground into a sheltering ally, a stealth heater that didn't care who held the high ground, only who understood the secrets beneath their feet. Metal, though cold to the touch, became a battlefield ally once heated. Soldiers turned everyday gear into survival tools, finding warmth in objects never designed for comfort. A canteen held against a tank's engine could heat water without a scrap of firewood. Vehicles returning from long patrols radiated a moment of precious heat. Men learned to cluster near the armor, rotating positions, to absorb the fading warmth before it disappeared into the night air. Ration tins served as makeshift stoves, just a few embers inside, starved of oxygen by a narrow lid, created a controlled burn that gave steady heat with almost no visible glow. Helmets became multi-tools for survival. Resting one over a tiny cluster of coals turned it into a miniature heater, warming both water and fingertips. Soldiers built windshields from stones or ammo boxes, not to feed flames higher, but to prevent even the smallest flicker from being spotted. Paper, cardboard, or wool was layered around containers to trap heat longer, stretching every second of warmth like a priceless resource. Everything was repurposed. Everything was tested by necessity. Nothing metal was too humble to become a life-preserving machine. These improvised inventions weren't just clever, they were quiet. And in a world where visibility invited death, a warm sip of water without a single spark was a victory as real as any earned on the front line. Flames were dangerous, but embers were loyal. Soldiers learned that the glow of a dying fire could be far more valuable than the blaze that came before it. Embers produced almost no smoke, no crackling sparks, and barely any visible light. They were heat stripped down to its essence. Pure survival, nothing extra. Men banked coals under layers of ash, preserving warmth long after flames disappeared. A handful scooped into a small tin could warm. Hands inside pockets or thaw, fingers too numb to reload a weapon. Some carried a single glowing coal wrapped in bark or cloth, feeding it bits of dry material throughout the day, keeping life smoldering quietly in their coat. Underground fire pits, like the Dakota-style method, gave off heat without revealing a soldier's position. Embers buried inside a lined hole warmed, stones that continued, radiating long after the coals died. Even charcoal became a frontline treasure. One small piece could cook a meal or heat a helmet of water with no plume of smoke rising to betray them. The goal was always the same: heat that stayed hidden. Out on the front, warmth wasn't measured in degrees. It was measured in risks avoided. A soft glow beneath the soil could mean another hour of safety, another night endured, another soldier waking up alive instead of frozen in silence. Not every source of heat came from friendly hands. When the cold dug in deeper than fear, soldiers took warmth wherever they could find it, even from the enemy. Artillery shells fresh from firing were still blistering hot, and the metal casings could heat rations if handled with caution. The trick was judging the moment. Too soon, and the shell could cook more than your food. Too late, and the heat was gone. Some soldiers scavenged abandoned bunkers or burned-out positions, searching the debris for metals still holding the memory of fire. It was a dangerous game, borrowing comfort from the aftermath of destruction. But the most controversial tactic involved fuel not meant for warmth at all. Explosives burned clean and hot when ignited correctly, and soldiers learned that a tiny shaving from a detonator or shell propellant could create a flame with barely any smoke. It worked too well. Accidents spread through the ranks, misjudged cuts, unstable compounds, and commanders eventually banned the practice. Yet, when winter closed its fists around the front lines, many men quietly ignored the rule. They chose the risk they could see over the cold that killed in silence. Survival didn't ask permission. It demanded ingenuity, courage, and sometimes disobedience. When the war ended, medals and records told the loud stories. Victories, strategy, the movements of armies across maps. But the quieter triumphs, the ones fought in frozen trenches and snow-choked forests, rarely made the history books. The tricks soldiers learned to stay warm were not celebrated as inventions. They were passed as whispers, carried home in memory, used later to keep families warm during winter blackouts or shared with hunters, mountain climbers, and explorers who needed heat without attention. Today, survival schools still teach underground fire pits, ember banking, and improvised heaters because the principles remain undefeated: conserve energy, hide light, waste nothing. The cold has not changed since WWII. It still waits for the moment when exhaustion lowers a guard or hunger slows a reaction. Modern heaters run on batteries, fuel, or electricity that can fail when disaster strikes. But the old methods, they need nothing but knowledge. the kind that doesn't freeze or run out. Those soldiers proved that warmth isn't always about comfort. It's about persistence. The human instinct to endure, to protect life even in the dark, turns simple heat into hope. And that hope still burns today, invisible and unstoppable, just like the men who first mastered it.